Welcome to another episode, guys. This is a momentous event. This is episode number 10.
Ooh.
Welcome to Agency Exposed.
All right.
Brad, how are you?
I'm doing pretty good. A little
Good.
tired today, but I'm functioning.
Good. Ken, you doing all right?
Why are you tired?
Oh, boy.
There were some storms last night.
Yes.
We had a tornado near Nashville.
Yes. Yeah, I was up throughout the night. My dog was a little restless. We had some bad storms come through here. So, unfortunately, there was a tornado that touched down here in Nashville, and things don't look really good right now. But I just want to...
Yeah, thoughts and prayers are with all those people
Yes.
in East Nashville. We got some team out there too, and
Some of your staff, right?
yeah. But they're all safe.
Oh,
but
good.
it does look like some areas are not doing too well, and so I'm sure we'll know more soon here. But yeah.
Well, I mean, I hate to say that's a good segue because we don't ever want to use those events as segues. However, talking through some of that this morning before we hit record, we have some of us had lived here in Nashville for a while, and we've been through some of those tornado sirens and experienced it. And we wanted to talk today about fear, anxiety, and not being controlled by it. How does it control you? And in the business situation, for those of you who are running agencies, work at agencies, engaged with agencies, whoever you are on that spectrum listening to this, and I know it does plague every one of us as human beings. So I think we're going to dive into that today. That's good for you guys?
Yeah, that's
Yes.
a tough subject, but it's necessary. It's we all deal with it. So let's just talk about it and expose it.
Sure. Well, I'm going to start, if you guys don't mind, and just say I failed at this miserably in my business, and I was driven by fear many times and made a lot of bad decisions that cost my business, myself, my people that work for me. And looking back, obviously, hindsight's 2020. But I would do a lot of things differently. I learned a ton, so I am thankful for that. But I know I was not alone, even though I felt like I did, as I talk and spend time with you guys, but also other agency owners out there and business owners. This is something that that plagues and can wreak havoc, but can also be a really good way to shore up your business and protect your business. So let's just dive deep into that pool. Brad, you want to start?
Yeah. I think for me, when I think about fear in business, I think about the unknown. And for me personally, it's not having clarity on my business immediately brings me fear, which I think is something that I personally have to deal with a little bit more. I have to get to the point where I don't have to know everything because I can't control everything. I can't control whether a client decides to do something different and no longer wants to work with us or anything, right? Or if the economy tanks and we go through a recession and people quit spending. I can't control a lot of that. But for me, I think fear comes from the unknown and not having clarity, whether good or bad. But I think we all struggle with it. I definitely struggle with it in my business, and I have a hard time sometimes not making decisions out of fear, and that's a big struggle. And definitely want to hear you guys' opinion on it. Talk a little bit about things that we've done to be proactive, things that we've done bad that have been reactive, and What about you, Ken?
I mean, I think this is something that's been. It's a personal core value of mine to not make fear-based decisions, and that came about primarily because I was made aware of the fear is a really detrimental emotion, right? When it pervades past the initial emotion of showing you that there's a situation that needs your attention, like that's great. Beyond that, if you're not aware of it, it takes over. Like, what is the last? Think about were there any good decisions you made out of fear? Probably not, right? There may have been good decisions that you made, after you realized something, and then as of a sound mind, you made a decision that was productive. But in fear, have you ever made really good decisions in fear? Probably not. How many things also, like, have you not done because of fear? Because fear is one of these emotions that actually it stops you. It's actually, it's used to stop you, and actually it's used strategically sometimes in the marketplace to stop you from doing something. Right? There are scare tactics, there's bullying in businesses, all that kind of stuff, right? So getting a handle on fear, I think, is one of the most practical things you can do as a business owner and leader. For us, one of the things that we do is, before we get into that, I just think it's not, I don't think anyone can control their fear, right? That's hard. That's a hard thing to do. But what you can do is be aware of it, and then once you're aware of it, you can manage it appropriately. And that takes, I believe, that takes conditioning and discipline, sort of building. It's like a muscle. You need to build that up. It doesn't just come, because it's not like a switch that you flip on and off. It's more like a willpower that you build up over time. Yeah. But I think it starts with being aware of it.
Yeah.
I think we should talk about, just briefly, some of the psychology around it, and some of the real common sense. Just kind of take a step back. I think one of the biggest helpful things for me is understanding how your brain works. That your brain doesn't know, like, if something is really happening or if it's not happening. It's all about what your senses and your thinking and your feeling, and then your brain acts accordingly. And so that's where fear really paralyzes us as business owners, and especially as agency owners, is that we're always kind of projecting and living in, okay, what would happen if this happened, or if I lost this big client, or if this client called and really got upset and wanted to change this and this. The domino effect of what that would be with, oh my gosh, I have to let staff go, or may not be able to make my mortgage payment, or I'm going to have to tell my wife we can't take this vacation, or whatever unreality your brain goes, your body doesn't know if that's reality or if it's not. It's like if you ever put on a pair of VR glasses or an Oculus, the reality, they just released this game. My son and I were looking at it last night. And it's amazing, because we have an Oculus, but it's you put a plank out on the top of a 100-story building, and you walk out on it.
Oh wow!
And you can fall off of it, and literally your brain and your body freaks out. Your adrenaline, you feel like you're on top of a building and you're falling.
Yeah,
like you literally have to have clear space around you, because you probably will fall and do all kinds of crazy stuff. But again, the point is,
that must look kind of funny from the outside.
It's hilarious.
You guys with these headphones.
It's hilarious. There's videos online about it. But my point is, your body doesn't, and your brain doesn't know the difference between reality and not. So I think if we could just understand that little part of how it affects us.
I think a lot of it has to do with the history and the exposure you've had to the fear in the past. So a lot of times I'll go into a situation and it smells like something in the past that I've done or seen or been part of that have and heightened the fear for the situation at hand. Only because most likely, if you have fear, you've somehow experienced something similar in the past where it wasn't a very positive thing. So the more you can overcome the fear and go through experiences and see the positive outcome, the next time you go through that, it's not going to be so fearful, obviously. So the reality is within us. But I think a lot of that has to come with our experiences. We talked about this a little earlier offline about how things people said to us, things that we've adopted, and truths that we've held about ourselves that are not true. Because normally, I mean, if you look at most of the stuff that we deal with that on a daily basis, that's fear. If you really look at it from a completely different perspective, what's the worst can happen? You lose your job. I mean, we live in a pretty thriving economy here. It'd be easy for any of us to go get a job, right? And you might have to go through, a little bit of hardship, but comparable to other people in this world, all three of us haven't made, so it's this attitude of gratefulness that we're grateful for what we have and that we really don't need all that much, right, to be beautiful human beings. And so I think, taking that all into account, it's the struggle that you're dealing with of trying to constantly, for a better lack of word, go into these situations and you're constantly talking yourself into, I don't need to have fear. I don't need to have fear. At the same time, you are feeling that pushback, and it's a constant battle. At least for me, it's a constant battle within myself of really how should I react to this, and how can I have a sound mind going into this so that I know this is to be sound and to be clear-headed through the process, where I'm not owning that fear to the point where it becomes unrealistic.
Yeah, I think that's an important aspect of combating fear, is identifying the source of information that's creating the fear in you, right? And so whether that's yourself creating a reality that's not true, because like Bob, to your point, like perception's reality. Our brains see, like, our feelings are the reality to our brains, whether they're created by real situations or ones that we make up. And so what is the source of that information that's driving that fear? So seeking truth is really important, right? That's true in business, that's true in life. We're living in a time right now where the coronavirus is kind of like creating a lot of scare and hysteria, and for good reason, possibly. But also we don't know fully, because most of what everyone hears is opinion of other people. And can you trust that opinion? Are you aligned? Are your interests aligned with the people that are giving you those opinions? And many times they're not. And so sort of step number one is figuring out what the truth actually is, right? And sometimes that's unraveling your own brain, because your brain's telling you the truth is something, right? When you're reading a situation, like, oh my gosh, this is going to happen, and then this is going to happen, this is going to happen. Well, those are probably not facts. Those are probably not truths. They may be, but we just don't know. And so we can maybe talk through some tactics, but there are some tactics you can take to actually stop yourself, and then go about. There's sort of a process you can take for like thinking through that in a sound mind. But ultimately, like, number one is like, okay, what's the actual truth here?
Yeah, that's good. What's the truth?
Yeah.
And I think also keeping in mind, we talked about this over coffee before the show, is that the only person that has your best interest at heart concerning your mental well-being is you. And I think that's really, really, really important. Like, the news or the media doesn't have your best interest at heart when it comes to your mental health. Your city, your colleagues, as much as they may love you and like you, or your client, they're too busy thinking about themselves, right, and their own business and doing what's best for them. So I think you have to own that, first of all. But also, I think, like you said, Ken, I want to spend some time talking about what are those things that you can put in place.
Yeah.
And again, I did not do this well in my business, and I'm learning from you guys and others that there's so many strong things. And I think the last thing that I would add as a basis to this conversation is number 3 is don't isolate yourself. Talk about your fears with people. It's like, when you isolate yourself and live in your own head, especially, Brad, we've talked about this as a solo owner of a business versus having partners, you carry so much internally. And as you guys know, those narratives can go to some pretty crazy places in your head, and those fears can. But when you sit down with trusted friends and advisors, however they may be, and talk them through and say, this is, I'm really having a lot of anxiety about this. I don't know which way to go with this client. It helps to bring a lot of clarity.
Yeah. Yeah, that's really good. As far as practical steps, we're going to talk about a little bit more practical steps of how to deal with the fear. But one of the things that I notice is whenever I have fear in my business, it's always a time as well where there is a lot going on, meaning there's a lot of work to be done. And sometimes the fear, you're actually working overtime trying to fix something that's been broken. And not only is there fear on that, but there's also just you're just exhausted. So what I find is when I feel that way is I need to start going through my calendar and taking things off my plate that I just don't need to be doing at that time to allow myself some space. And then also that's a time when I'm eating the worst. Right? I'm not eating as well. I'm not getting exercise. I'm not taking care of my body because I'm stressed out. I'm overworking, trying to fix issues and things. And so I try to find myself at that point really looking at my life and going, okay, what can I get out of my life that I don't need to be doing right now to allow me time to be able to rest? Because it's hard to rest when there's fear. Some people do go off and they want to just get away from it and retract. And I do that sometimes, but my biggest struggle is really just not taking care of myself. And when I'm not well physically, I can't make great decisions. If I'm up late at night, if I'm not sleeping well, I wake up, I'm tired, and I can't make those clear decisions that I need to make. So that's the first thing that I do is I look at myself and go, what can I do? And so that's a real struggle when you have a family and you have kids and your life is, hopping and you're going all the time. So.
Yeah, that just doesn't come. Like you have to be really intentional about it in order to do it. Right?
Yes.
You don't just end up. It's not like you just do that in your free time because there is no free time. So you almost have to make that an initiative in your life to be healthy.
Yeah, I this last couple of months have been tough for me, and I've noticed, man, I've gained some weight, and what am I?
You're looking really good, man.
Thank you so much. Yeah, I got a nice tire right there. Anyways, but I've noticed that, and I'm not sleeping as well, and my back hurts a little bit more because I'm just not exercising as much, and but it starts with there. But and I think that's the key for me is that you've got to do things that are very intentional when there is that fear and stress that comes on. Otherwise, it can really eat at you, and
Absolutely.
it can take a toll for sure. So there's a lot of other things that I do too. We'll talk about here in a minute.
That's a good point. I don't know. I run into a lot of sort of leaders of companies and things, and a lot of people aren't aware of this one fact that I believe in, which is, hey, if you own an agency right now, or you own any business, or you're leading any business, you have any role of leadership, you, whether you like it or not, are in sort of like the cockpit. You're in the pilot's seat in some capacity, right? And now you have the responsibility to be conditioned to be that person, right? You wouldn't want a pilot who stayed up all night and was kind of groggy and didn't really study his last exam, all that kind of stuff. Like that person has to come to their job prepared to do their job really, really well. And I think that whether you like it or not, you're in that position where you need to come prepared. You need to be conditioned. You need to be the person that leads your organization appropriately. Otherwise, you're really irresponsible. And that's just the person. That's the role that you're in if you're in a leadership role, and you have to accept that. And once you accept that, you have to realize, okay, that means that I have to live a life that has these qualities to it because I need to condition and get myself to where I can lead in the right way. I can be that pilot who knows how to do all the things in the different situations, because you don't want to be. It's pretty irresponsible to be that pilot who again, doesn't know how to handle the different situations, and lead appropriately.
And it's really hard to lead a company when you're just reactive, right? It's almost impossible. And
it's really sucky to be in a company that you're leading if you're just reactive, right?
Just reactive. So I think the idea is, how do you become proactive in your company so that you can prepare for these moments when there is this extra stress or could be fear, and how do you take that fear and flip it on its head and it become an experience that's positive and growth, and your team can win the challenge and feel even stronger than it was before it came along. And so I grew up my career working with agencies, and there was always this fear that, the client would kind of get a little bit, you could tell, right? We have clients for a couple of years, and all of a sudden they're starting to put pressure on you to perform. Maybe they felt like the honeymoon phase was over and now it's time to perform. And, they always put their little thumb on you to say, hey, if something doesn't happen, we're going to start shopping. And there's always this fear in that equation. And you know, my business, I'm always like, how do I not ever get there? You know, and sometimes it just happens. It's not something that we can control, but and I think being proactive is key. I know that for our agency, we have done things out of necessity to make us more proactive, and a lot of that is just a stronger and tougher communication up front with our clients, where we put a little bit more demands on how we work with them, right? So that they don't come in and start to ask us for things that they're not paying us for, or ask us to do things that are not part of our contract with them. So it's just being more clear. Clarity is always key. Understanding, you know, what we will do and what we won't do, so that when we're being pushed on from them, or they're trying to, or their expectations are different, you know, we try to eliminate where our expectations are different, and trying to say, hey, this is what we're doing, and so there's a clear expectation. Because sometimes I feel like that's been a lack in our business, and it's got to the point where you know that's when we feel kind of the pinch with our clients.
Yeah, you hit on a couple of things there. So maybe for the next half or last half of the show today, we can talk about specifically, you know, if this thing is, we're trying to stay on a road that takes us to success, takes us to growth, takes us to well-being and health, mentally, emotionally, financially, of your business. The fears and the other things are when we get off that path, when we go to the side, we get, you know, sidetracked, go into the future too far in our thinking, wherever. Let's talk about those guardrails that are really healthy to stay in place, that keeps us on that road that we need to be staying on, of health and financially and mentally and organizationally. I think they come down to, basically, you could put them into two buckets, right? Financial guards, you know, for your business health, and then relational and client guards. So let's just start there. Ken, what would you say? What have you guys put in place at Medicake? Let's say from a financial, both for your business, running your business operations, forecasting, savings. What did you guys decide to do on that?
Yeah. Well, for us, like, again, I have the opinion that that the agency world has some really potentially fatal sort of toxic relationships that happen, or modes of operation. I don't think they come from a bad place, but I think that they're almost accepted. You know, I talk to agencies all the time who, you know, don't get paid for 90, 120 days, and sometimes never get paid, and they're delivering all their work, and they go out of business, all this kind of stuff. I mean, that's just one area, you know, or really bad relationships where, you know, they get, the client may use threats and things to get what maybe they shouldn't have. It was never part of an agreement. It's an odd area because you have, I don't know where all that comes from, but that's what I observe, and I'm not originally from out of that. So I wonder, Brad, if you have any opinions on that, you know, from your area, from your background, because you've been in sort of traditional agency world. I don't know if that has roots somewhere, but I think I think ultimately those things don't serve either the client or you well at all. I have the opinion that, I mean, this is not just my opinion, this is just fact, right? Like, if we really think about it, you know, if you're not healthy, then you can't deliver success. And so your clients don't get what they need anyway. So you being healthy is mutually beneficial.
How do you communicate that to your customer? Like, do you ever proactively communicate that up front?
Yeah, and we're really careful about it because obviously, you know, there's a bit of a disruptive message inside of that. It's a little bit different, although a lot more agencies are I think aware of that, and I see a movement of that kind of like health, and healthy boundaries being put up. But I think ultimately it's like, hey, you know, we want to be able to serve you and over deliver with the value that we create. and have you be extremely excited at the end of whatever we do. And the only way we can do that is if we can focus on that and not have to worry about being paid. That's one important part. Like, let's be honest, like if you're concerned that the person you're working for may not pay you or may not pay you on time, or maybe, and I know we're only talking about payment issues, it's a bunch of different other ones, but like, you're concerned that you can't pay your rent this month because that check hasn't come in or whatever, then you're not going to be able to focus on doing really great work for anyone. Right. And so I think there's just a bit of an education around, hey, this is just, we want to, there's a partnership. We both have roles, and in that, here are some healthy boundaries inside of those. Understanding expectations, understanding what we can and can't do, understanding that there you have responsibilities to as well as us. I think that's one part of it.
Yeah, and that comes down to processes, right? So a clear statement of work, clear agreements that say, and making sure not just that you create them and have your clients sign them, but that you go through a reading process and an understanding of
you can explain them.
What hours you work, how many hours we work, when,
how you communicate, what's expected from them.
I think that's really, really important.
A lot of this area, I feel like there's often an overextension, so meaning like, I observe from not inside of our organization, actually from other organizations, that there are a lot of emergencies that happen. Now, when we're really getting down to it, like how many situations are truly emergencies that you would need to be called up on a Saturday night at your kid's baseball game and go run and fix something. Like, there are situations like that, but I do feel like things like that often happen. They often become abused. And that almost is just accepted. And so I do think there's this idea of healthy. What is you as an agency? How can you deliver success? You have to think through those things, and then that has to be, once you decide that, right, and decide how you can over deliver in value based on, hey, this system of success that you can create, which has some boundaries to it. Now then out of that, I mean, because you have the client's best intentions in mind with that, then you have to communicate that to them. I know I didn't really answer your question. We kind of went off on a tangent, but I do think that area is one that is challenging. So I mean, I think when to your original question of what have we done, I personally think through a lot of those things often, and some of how we operate is a little bit different to the traditions of how agencies operate. But I really often, and this is just true in my life, like I think it's important to challenge traditions appropriately, to make sure that they're actually done in healthy ways. And
talk about
reasons.
How you guys solved the billing issue of 60, 90 day net that agencies are notoriously waiting around for the big companies to pay them, and this is part of this this cash flow issue. How did you guys fix that? Cash
flow is I was told about 10 years ago by someone outside. It was a mentor of mine who had owned many businesses, very successful. They said the number one threat to your existence is cash flow. The reason is no one thinks about it. A lot of times, and I think Keith Cunningham, who has he's like at a CPA masterclass or something like that. He talks about this specifically as well. So if you get a chance to look him up, he's really good. But most people don't like accounting and all that kind of stuff, and so like cash flow is like this kind of like nebulous thing that most people don't want to or really understand. But the truth is, it's like most people look at, what did I send all the invoices out, and then all those invoices that were sent for most people look like money, on their books and for that month, and it's like, sweet, we made whatever it is, $100,000 this month or $1 million this month. But then if that cash never comes in, then that's where the challenge becomes. And so cash flow is one of those things that no one, and for a lot of agencies, I feel like that especially the bigger ones, that becomes somebody else's problem. That's like a different department's problem. Like they follow up and they do all those kind of things. The problem is when you're small, you don't have that effort, and it's even arguable whether anyone should do just that. Should invest in that inefficient effort of like just following up for no reason, right? And so I would run into agency after agency that big ones that went out of business because either a client didn't or couldn't pay them, and it was after a long period of time. So they've done all this work and they've hired these people, and they go out of business because they had no cash in the bank, but they still sent those invoices and they still had
depending on the size of your agency, that can be devastating. If you're a small agency with just a handful of people, a $50,000 invoice that takes months to collect can devastate you. Or if you start getting into the six-figure invoices that an agency like a
and
company
it's common practice for people to say
like
60, 90 days net or something like that. But if you think about the reality of what that is, that means you don't get paid for 3 months. Can you float everything for 3 months? If you can, arguably that's more of a loan, and you should be getting paid interest on it. So
what have you guys done?
So for us, like again, we're just we wanted to solve the cash flow issue, and we work in e-commerce, and consumer products. You pay, you get the service, you pay right away, and so we went to electronic payments, and we simply split them over the number. At least as of this recording, this could have, obviously could change, but like right now, what works best is we just split them evenly over the months of the engagement. So whether that's retainer or whether that's a project, we just spread it out across sort of evenly.
So every client must set up, and it's not just electronic payments. You guys do the pull, right?
Yeah. Well, right. It's sort of like it's like any other subscription, and there are plenty of them, and a lot of companies do them. We securely take all the payment information and charge your method of payment on the dates that are predetermined.
All
right?
your clients.
All of our clients.
I know. Okay, so a lot of people listening to this are like, "No way!" I have clients that would never do that.
Right.
I've been trying to do the Ken method, and
well, it's not the Ken method, but
no, I know. But we have some of our clients that pay electronically, and that's awesome. And we have other ones that literally their infrastructure doesn't have. At least they tell me their infrastructure doesn't have the ability. They're just not in that. They're just kind of a little bit more traditional in that way, where they cut checks, and so
they keep the money in the mattress.
There you go. There you go. Yeah.
Just kidding.
And you'd be surprised, and these are some larger organizations that still cut checks.
How long did it take you guys to get from doing it the way everyone else did to having an auto subscription payment that you guys pull every month?
It was sort of a longer planning process than I would liked, and at one point we just ripped the Band-Aid off and like, okay, we have to just start doing this. So the hardest part about it was figuring out the different systems to allow for that to happen. Surprisingly enough, it is still astounding to me how much technology we have, yet we're still sending paper checks, and there are still not systems that make not sending paper checks easy. And if you're listening, Bill.com is better than getting paper checks. It's still not great. And I'm sure this will get better in the future, but ultimately it's like, look, if you went into a restaurant, you ordered a sandwich, would it be possible to be like, okay, cool, I'm gonna send you an invoice, or they're gonna send me an invoice, I'll pay it in 30 days. They would go out of business. That wouldn't happen, right? That wouldn't work. It's just not how we work.
And it's funny too, because I find that we don't have problems too much with late payments, but when we do, sometimes we have to put a lot of energy into the communication back and forth. My controller has to get involved, and I'm involved even at some level where there's emails going back and forth, and people internally checking with their financial services of where things are. And it just takes up so much time just to check on one payment.
That's exactly right. And guess who pays for that ultimately?
Yeah, we do.
Well, your clients do eventually because
they do. Yeah, that's true.
Because your prices are. I mean, you have to accommodate that, right? So if you have to have 3 people on staff to follow up, and again, this is not to say like, in my experience, it's more the issue of the uncertainty of when those things come in,
the fear, right?
Versus you're in. It's one element that you're out of control with, right, which is a very crucial one, and so getting more control on that just allows you to have a more secure and better path forward. It's not that people, again, like, I mean, it's not that people would do it intentionally. You know, it may just get forgotten, or you may be in a 60, 90-day cycle, or there's just so many different scenarios. And ultimately, as a business, I believe you need to create at least a path where you can exist in a healthy way outside of the circumstances of the people that you work with.
Yeah. So there's one way that you've taken to eliminate some of the fear, and some of the uncertainty in your business.
Did you just go to all of them and say, "Hey, we need a credit card"?
No, we grandfathered in. Okay. So so we didn't. It wasn't like, "Hey, look, that doesn't work." But for any new clients, this is probably 5 years ago now. But any new clients at the time, we tested it. We kind of like, again, I believe in making smart decisions and not just like taking stupid risks. We tested it, but we found that as long as we were able to communicate it in a way that was beneficial, like logically beneficial to the client, which it is ultimately. Like, again, like it all comes down to like, look. First, we don't have to employ all this staff that worries about this kind of thing that ultimately gets the cost passed on you. So we pass that savings on. That's part of how we can operate in the value that we can operate in. And number 2, like another big one is like we can focus on your work, which is important, right? That's how your employees work. Like if if employees were not sure
them for 60 days,
yeah, you think they'd be mentally present? It would be impossible. And then there's a whole bunch of other reasons. So like once we kind of like got that together, it actually was not hard at all. And every once in a while there's a, someone that thinks that they have, that maybe an organizational pushback or something like that. And we have worked out other scenarios, but they have to accomplish the same thing, which is, we just have that certainty. And so even if there are other scenarios we work out, they have to still check the boxes of, is this a healthy business decision? And I think that ultimately, I guess maybe one of the main points to communicate here is, I know we're getting back to fear. One of the things you can do to combat fear-based decisions is preparation. And I think there's a whole bunch that happens inside that doesn't happen overnight. And one of probably the main areas that fear manifests is in finances, because if you were financially 100% free, you wouldn't be worried if you didn't get another job, or if you didn't have this, or if someone left you, or whatever those might be, or the economy went down. And so the area of finances is a key one. If you can find some security around that, and I would say this, like, it's not overnight. So if you did one thing, just get a cushion. I shoot for having a year of operating capital in the bank. That is a lot more than most of my, financial advisors say that you need. But for us, like, that's one of the things that allows us to say, hey, look, I don't want to be hiring and firing staff all day long. We want to build a team that creates something different. And so being financially secure allows us to do that. And I'm not saying that we ultimately have it figured out by any stretch, but it's all about like being aware of it, I believe, and then pursuing that. And just the pursuit of that, which you'll never fully achieve, the pursuit of that allows you to now have prepared a level more than you were prepared,
Brad, what about you guys, Brad? What at Anthem Republic? What are some key things that have eliminated fear and anxiety for you, just in a process play? situation?
Sure. I think it's having better contracts, number one, for us, having some service agreements that are a little bit more, have more guidelines and guardrails have definitely helped. Early communication has helped, and also when we sense that there's, for instance, if we have a client that is anxious to get projects done, but is not as concerned about getting us paid, or feels like passes that over to like that's not my department and not really all that engaged, then just really at that point taking a hard look at whether or not this client is going to be a good fit for us down the road, and if it's something that we need to address moving forward. Otherwise, we can't continue to move forward. Part of financially wise, just having a really good just a line of credit, even if we need it. Not that we use it very often, just for things like accounts receivable with good standing clients, obviously. I'm the sole owner of the company, so having some capital that can last if things go dry, or if you have issues trying to get paid, or something, the economy kind of dips for a half a year or so. I think is always really wise, if you can, making sure that with that capital that you're also investing that capital so it's making money while if it's sitting there. I think that's one of the things that we're always constantly doing is if we do have money on our books, that we're trying to make sure that money that's sitting there for a rainy day or for even growth is still making money at some level but still being easily accessible.
I would love for you to talk more about that, about what specifically, is it like a high yield?
Yeah, I mean, it can be as much as,
or is
and
it
it's
actually
different because I'm a sole owner, so it's different for me. So sometimes for my business, we will put it in a high yield, having a high yield interest rate, and high yield doesn't mean high, and
right.
It means like 2.5%, right?
Yeah.
But
Well,
it's still
now it's like 1.9, but yeah.
Yeah, but still, maybe making as much as inflation, but also taking some money off the books and then personally investing them and then moving the money back and putting it on my balance sheet. Sometimes I do that from time to time personally because I'm a sole owner. I have the discrepancy to do that. So it's basically taking money that's already there. But yeah, it's accessible. So if I need it, I can have it on, back in the business, on the books in a day, so it's always having access to liquid money just in case. Boy, there's other things that I do personally. Might have to have another podcast for that one, but
the investing with Brad.
Yeah, the investing with Brad.
I think that's an important one because having just the idea of diversifying is important. I think in business, and that's one area that I think most business owners may or may not be versed in, but either you are or you're really versed in it or you have no clue.
Yeah.
And what can you do? Should you have a financial advisor? Should you do it yourself? Like all those kind of things.
And I think from a business owner's standpoint is that a business owner has to be healthy financially for their business to be healthy financially, right? If you're living on the edge and you're barely scraping by, barely paying your own rent as a business owner, one bad move can sink not only the business but yourself. And I think that's one thing that I at least always strive for. It's very difficult at times because sometimes as a business owner, when you have to take a hit, you're the one personally taking the hit, right? If there's something, you'll probably pay employees for a while before you even take your paycheck, because in the end, your business needs to survive for you to feel like you're going to survive. And so I think, as much as you can make yourself healthy, and I think, Hannah Paramore, which was on our past podcast, even said this, is take care of yourself first, because you almost have to. I become my own bank at times. Like I'm, if I need a loan, I take a loan from myself and put it on my balance sheet.
Well, it's the healthiest for everybody else too. It goes down to that, like, sort of maybe, it might be contrary to like what you might think at first.
Yeah.
But really, you being healthy first is the only way that you can help lead a company that makes everyone else healthy.
And that helps me with my fear personally, that if I feel as a whole I'm okay for the time being, then even if my business feels like it's struggling or feel like you might be losing a client or some financial resources, at least you feel like, okay, there's not two households that are sinking, right? It's not my personal finance as well as my business finance. It's just one right now, and the other one can kind of hopefully help a little bit support the other one or whatever, right? So, because it's all personal when it comes down to the end of the day. It hits me no matter what. If I'm struggling at home, it hits me, right? There's stress, there's fear. If I'm struggling in the business, there's stress and there's fear. And so I think having both on fire, both homes on fire, that's hard. And that's really hard. And that's one place that I at least try to focus on. Any other questions?
No, that's, I think that is, I think that's really good. I agree. It's sort of like putting your own mask on first, which is what they tell you on the planes. Good. And that's true in your business. And that's not just through the finances, right? That's true with your health.
Correct.
That's true with your mental state. That's true with your work ethic.
Yeah.
And I know we're almost at the end, and all we've talked about is preparing in order to combat fear. But there's sort of so much more on that.
Well, let's talk. Let's talk. We got about 15 minutes or so. Let's talk about the culture and your staff, the team. How do you, if you are working on yourself, like I said, your own mental health, your own financial, your own processes, you want that to permeate the atmosphere, and you want to lead well. Do you guys provide any opportunities, any valves to let your team members let off or to hear? Because they might be internalizing a lot of this themselves, right? So just as we're going through it, you're going through it, they're going through it.
I mean, for us, it's always, I kind of wear my emotions a little bit on my sleeve, and that's not always a good thing, especially around certain employees, because employees need to feel that their job is secure, right? Even when there's a loss of business, when they see it, they still need to. They're always questioning. So I try to offer as much transparency. At the same time, not bring in the anxiety that I can bring in, even though I sometimes don't do a really good job at that. But I notice that when I do that, you can tell there's an anxiousness, right? They feel it, and it's permeable. And I think that's the challenge, is how do you be transparent with employees so they understand, hey, this is what we're dealing with right now. We all have to kind of pitch in. We all have to do this. But at the same time, have hope and know that it's just a little blip, that we'll replace that client with a new client, right? Lickety split, right?
Man, I think that is so. You touched on something that I believe in really strongly, which is, and it's really hard. Like, as a leader, you have to be able to have the wisdom of what to share and what not to. Not for misdirection or anything like that, but more because different people have different capacities for whatever is going on. And there's a time to get everyone, if there's a real emergency, then that's when things have to be communicated. But there are times when you shouldn't. And I believe with fear, especially since we're talking about this specifically, fear is like it spreads so easily, and it's almost like, as human beings, it's like we want to spread it. For a lot of people, it's sort of like gossip or anything else. It's like, maybe it helps us feel better. Maybe it's therapeutic or something like that. But as a leader in a business, especially when you're talking about fear, which is I think that word denotes irrationality. So it's not rational. I don't believe you should spread that. Internally, we have a culture of not spreading fear and anxiety. It's literally containing it, and it's not isolating yourself and squashing it and making it go away, but it's just the first defense is inside of you, I believe, right? And so you have some tactics to deal with that, and then if it should be discussed, because it might not be rational, if it should be discussed, it can be discussed appropriately. By the way, we also we started doing. We have actually one of my pastors and good friends comes in. He's actually coming in today. He comes in and provides a if anyone wants to talk to a counselor, and he's just there, and it's private. It's obviously not required or anything like that. It's just a
Is that
CZ? Mental health thing. It is CZ.
Oh yeah, CZ's a good friend.
And we can, and he, yeah.
Can we come over and take advantage of that?
Yes.
Yeah, can I come?
Come today. But whatever it is, whether it's what I found is like a mental health is really
That's
important,
good.
and
That's
most
really
people
good.
have a barrier to that, and fear is one of those things that really pervades inside of your mentality and just kind of festers and sits there.
I would say
yeah.
that's a great investment. Like if you have a business with a team,
It doesn't take any money. I mean, it really, money
whether
wise,
it's a clergy or whether it's a friend that's a therapist or whatever it may be, is, hey, can you come in for a couple hours today or once a month? And it's just there. That's great. Like if anybody wants to go in there and just talk or whatever.
It also removes the stigma of, again, like going to a counselor is like a barrier that most people have to get over. We've talked about that before. And so it helps remove that. It's just like, hey, it's easy. Like, this resource is here if you want it. Anyone can go, and it's completely confidential.
So is there a
all that
line
stuff.
outside the door?
Yeah, they yeah, basically. No, you could tell the anxiety of the office depending on if there's a line.
I would go for seconds.
Yeah, right. Just don't talk about me.
What are some other real practical personal ways for you guys? I know for me, learning how to be present and to breathe in these situations, it sounds a little woo-woo, but, taking a step back when I'm aware of feeling anxious or fearful and just like stopping and taking 5 deep breaths, you realize how shallow your breathing becomes when you are doing this kind of stuff. And I guarantee you it's just deep breathing, slowing down, closing your eyes will make you feel 100% better for that moment. And what it does is it makes you aware of like, oh my gosh, I am totally not breathing regularly. I'm not in the moment. And just getting in the habit of doing that is because your brain just goes to the future.
For me, I think when I get really stressed, I go to scripture a lot, and I think it's only because, personally, I feel like there's so much like God talks about for me all these areas about fear, and it's really about not having fear in things, real practical things for me to do. So I try to just dwell on that. At the same time, have a heart of just gratefulness. So I try to bring in gratefulness to look at everything I do have and not what I will lose. Because fear, it feels to me like a losing of something. I'm losing something that is supposed to be valuable. But the reality is that, Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, the movie, has a good quote on there that says when they talked about money because Charlie got that golden ticket, right? And everybody wanted money. And his grandfather said, he's like considering taking the money. He's like, you want something as common as money? And it's like, it is like what we base our fear on a lot of times is superficial. It's money. And like, it's things that are so common in this world and not really all that valuable. I know it's weird to say money not valuable, but the reality is sometimes there's things that are just really not that valuable when you look at life. And so I think I just try to ground myself. I try to go in with it with a heart of gratefulness. And then I find myself the same thing, Bob. Like I find myself when I'm stressed and fear that I'm not fully taking good breaths. So I've even done some stuff where I've sat for 20, 30 minutes every morning and just breathe and meditate and just focus on my breathing to make sure that. And it helps to really relieve a lot of the stress. Again, talking about rest, getting good rest, eating well when you're feeling this, when you're under the amount of pressure that we can be under. So,
yeah, that's really good. How about you, Ken? I know you work out a lot, you eat healthy. What are some other ways, like when you get in these seasons of anxiety?
I think I'm prone to fear. Like, and I identified that for myself early on. I grew up in New York City. There was enough uncertainty around, I was like about a couple miles away when 9/11 happened, all that kind of stuff. I think I'm prone to fear because, once you realize that, and when you're growing up, once there comes a point when you like realize that, you're not as safe as you thought you were.
Yeah.
That for different people it happens different ages. But that, I don't know, for whatever reason, I think I am, and so, but it does not control me, and I would say it is. I've worked hard for it not to be a problem in my life at all. Right now, I don't believe it is. However, that proneness has caused me to go to has created the obvious need for me to figure it out. And by figure it out, I mean like there's some preparing health. I believe in health mentally, spiritually, physically, and I also think that especially if you're leading anything, a family, a business, or whatever. I actually look at that as a very high calling, and I didn't always maybe see it that way, but that's why I look at it that way. And you see how pro athletes condition, and it's like if pro athletes who literally at the end of the day are playing a game that I'm not minimizing it, but it's a game of some kind, right? If they condition so aggressively, and then how much more should you be conditioning, leading a family, leading a business, leading any initiative, or a team, or just one person, or no people, just yourself. Conditioning is so important, right? Like, why would you think that you can come in every day after having not slept last night because you binge watched Netflix and actually perform? That doesn't make sense, right? Would Kobe Bryant do that? Would Michael Jordan do that? Would any of these guys, do that before a big game? And so I think that analogy or that metaphor for me is how I try to apply that as much as possible in my life.
That's good.
That drives me. The other thing is, I would say, like Brad, we talk about it. We touch on it every once in a while. Faith for me is a big part of it. Actually, I don't believe God has fear for you. I don't think that comes from God. And you might even say that faith and fear like really can't coexist. And so, that's a tactic. And again, just to be clear, like I don't think any of us have this figured out. I don't think but these are our this is my experience of like going through this kind of stuff and trying to figure it out. But faith is a big component, because ultimately, even in business, like we've talked about this before, like when it's around for something greater than you, whether that's a purpose or a mission or a connection to a higher power, whatever that is, that takes the pressure off of you. Mm-hmm. And practically speaking, that can help balance out any fears that come, because ultimately fear, especially in the business world, comes when like it probably feels like the buck stops with you. And if I mess this up, everything and everyone involved go down. And I think that pressure creates
letting go of control is what you guys keep getting to. Yeah. I think is, as business owners, as leaders, we do have a certain amount of control that we're responsible for. But there's also a lot of, we've got to be able to discern where that stops. I'm responsible for my own well-being. I'm responsible for the financial decisions and the leadership of the company. What I'm not responsible for is other people's lives and their future and their feelings and their, one of the mistakes I have made in my career is feeling super responsible for my team. And while that is a good thing and you are on one level, I'm not responsible for their lives, their well-being, their happiness, their futures. They are responsible for those. And while they're on my team and they're in my business, the best thing I can do is lead them well and culture and create a culture of health for them to do their job well and to do a good job on behalf of my company, whatever it may be. But being willing, it's hard to let people go. It's hard to confront them. It's hard to move them to different places or as they move on, because you feel so responsible. And that's just one area I think that you have to know where your limits are of who you're responsible for, what you're responsible for, because those are areas that fear can really go into. And I'm not responsible for how my client feels about me or how they respond to me or whether they like me or not. My job is to do what I know is the right thing to do.
Yeah, you're responsible for your actions,
Right.
And that's all ultimately you can control. And those influence how other people feel.
Right.
But ultimately, other people are responsible for how they feel.
Right.
You know, it's a really, I mean, it's really connected, but it's very different.
Right.
Yep.
That's good. That's good. Well, thank you guys for being transparent and honest. And this is some really good practical advice. And I would just encourage anyone, if they want to talk about this more, we have a Facebook group, Agency Exposed Podcast. Look it up on Facebook, and we can let you in there. We want to be more proactive in that Facebook group and start some of these discussions I think are important. We're starting to get more reviews and recommendations on iTunes. We want to encourage you to do that. Anything else you guys want to say?
No, I mean, I'll when we create the show notes, we'll try and link to any resources that would help on this topic. You know, so we'll put those in the show notes because there's a few that I'm thinking of that we haven't talked about that could be of use when it comes to tactically, like how do you actually address fear and make the right decisions. So yeah,
follow us on Facebook and Instagram. That's always good.
Yes.
Awesome,
Yes.
guys.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
We'll talk to you guys soon.
Okay.
See ya.
Till next time.